seek. Um, One of my teachers, Sai Baba, gave an example that based on this principle of energy follows thought, he said that even choosing the vocation, once you're established in truth, you can do anything you want, you're unperturbed. But before that, he gave an example of criminal lawyers and criminal journalists, crime journalists. He said they don't realize that they're dwelling on constantly, and they bring into their mind and heart these thoughts that become part of their disposition, and it has an effect on their, on their happiness. So until we're really anchored in that truth, we want the highest company. And if we have to, if we have to engage with energy that is the floor, we can always just be conscious and protect ourselves in one way or the other, by prayer, and there's many techniques that are given out. If we draw in some energy through, not being attentive or some other error of ours, there's so many ways of cleansing it. One is to be in that, to try to be in that company for a length of time to cleanse that energy. There are techniques of yoga and breathing that actually, or Chinese ways of many spiritual disciplines that help you cleanse your chakras. In other talks I've talked about breathing exercises that very rapidly will, if for instance, somehow you've drawn into you a lot of negative energy. Through associating and opening up to somebody who was very close to you, you opened your heart to that person, and that person was carrying a lot of negative energy, and you drew that energy in you. This will happen, and you can't escape that. You can work on yourself, and I do that, and sometimes I do that almost purposefully, because out of compassion I want to draw in, take in somebody's pain or energy. And naturally being very empathic, I do that very powerfully, and then I work on myself to cleanse it. As we gain understanding and control and reducing the chatter of thoughts, we naturally become happy. Happiness doesn't mean always being conscious that you're happy. You're always conscious you're happy, you're not really fully engaged in. If you're a person who meditates deeply, that is a possibility. But otherwise, you're just totally engaged in whatever the task of your life, in fulfilling your life, and that's happiness. You will be aware on a higher level of whatever state you're in. If you're really watchful, you will also see the difference of how others, what state others are in. Another question is that there's many questions related to this state of non-duality. One of those questions is, I attain in myself this state of non-duality, and I'm kind of out of this whole structure of thought and the mirror of the world. The world is in terrible conflict. The world is in a disastrous state of conflict. And our consciousness partakes the consciousness of the world. And one of the things of the teacher of the I inquiry always will tell you is your consciousness is a reflection of the consciousness of the world. And there's not a way to be free of, you're to be happy if you will continue to be a part of that reflection of the consciousness of the world, because it's so much in conflict. But if you come out of that, then what is your relationship with the world? If you come out of that state, that's a fair question, right?
Very fair.
If you come out of that state and you realize your unity, you also see your unity with life and you see others as souls. And then you see actually not as an idea of brotherhood, which is within the duality of thought. You see in actuality the others are you. When I say actually, I really mean that. I mean, many saints demonstrate that when you go to them, and then they'll tell you, 10 minutes ago you were thinking of me, or you had this thought, last night you had this dream, or I gave you that dream and you were thinking, I was telling you this in the dream. How are they able to do that? Is it power? No. In one way, power, because we don't have that functioning in us. But they have just really ended the duality, and they see ourselves as themselves. They're no different. It's no dividing line. We have really divided in our consciousness. This, the psychological entity, that's the basis of that. The meaning of that is we have divided, I'm separate from you. To meditate and constantly try to understand this thing, or even just inquire, what are Buddha and Christ and all these people talking about? Is it really possible to be free from this psychological entity? And to understand it from your own standpoint, where you are in life and what your experience is, to really understand that, is what will bring you closer to that. Will build your own individual. There's a Sanskrit word called antakarana, meaning the rainbow bridge, which every time you make a real effort to understand life, you build a little strand, a bridge from your personality to that pure consciousness. And it keeps on building and building, and it's built through lifetime. It's not lost from one life to another life. It is not lost. And another thing is that along this path, even the slightest real effort to understand life and walk towards that, look towards that, creates an impulse in your causal body that creates a vibratory capacity in their physical body, which will not be lost from one life to another life. When you come back, you take a body of exactly the same quality that
As the one you left?
As the one you left.
Yeah.
Exactly the same quality. And your real individuality is that is that impulse, that is constant movement of attaining that goal, perfecting itself. That is the real you. When somebody asks Lord Buddha about reincarnation, and is this going to me? Is this going to be me? Or is this is the person that reincarnates, is it going to be me or not? And he said, it's going to be you and it's not going to be you. And what that means is, we can really clearly, with clarity, understand that this threefold life is limited to this threefold situation, a three-dimensional life. This one, the name you have, the form you have, the things you wanted to do in this particular life, all that is mortal. The three lower bodies that we have are also mortal. The impulse behind everything you wanted to do is somehow related to something in your soul. And eventually all those impulses, life balances out and teaches you lessons to take you further to that goal. This thing about happiness and unhappiness, from the standpoint of the soul, may be a totally different thing. When we leave this life and watch ourselves, what we may thought of as happiness, that watching being may think of it as completely different. Because what we thought of as really hard would be maybe a soul leading us to a state or a lesson or a seeing that was so critical to bringing us to that unity of incredible happiness. And it's that light and the dark, which you now see in the three-dimensional, make the whole picture of you. If you see a negative, you see the dark and the light. If you take out the dark, there is nothing. Your individuality is complete because of these experiences that balances out. You're going forward, you're trying to learn this or that, in one life balancing the other, and moving forward to that eventual happiness. And so happiness and unhappiness are, we label in this three-dimensional state. We will all come to that eventual happiness. But better come in this life than the next one. And why we are all in this room today is because our soul is calling us to learn about these things and to understand about the duality and about samadhi and equanimity and a greater understanding of these things. Beth, you're awful quiet over there.
Listening attentively, Waris.
Do you want to ask if they have questions?
Yeah, that'll give me a break.
Waris, earlier you talked about the experience of basically, if I understand it, no mind, and that you can move through this world quite well without it.
No personal separative mind. You need the mind to be a consciousness.
Right.
Right.
And so, so in this journey of getting to that integrated
Right.
space,
Right.
that's an integrated, would you call that an integrated experience? Where there's still awareness, but not a one of separation?
You know, in that state, the thinker and the thought have become one. The experiencer and the experience have become one.
Mm-hmm.
That is very easily understood if you understand that the past and future have disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because the experiencer and the experience are always engaged in the business of getting somewhere in the future, and
Right.
you know, this whole thing of attainment.
I've been, no, I don't know, I think I told you about that period of time where I would have conversations with people and have no recollection. There was no thinking part of Beth's mind there. There was no, and afterwards, the only reason I would know I had those conversations is because somebody else was there and told me I said these things and had this conversation with people. And then there was that period of time, during that period of time, whatever was thinking was slowly starting to go away.
Yeah.
And so these were just very intermittent experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I can say they were, I don't know, I had no experience of them. I say experiences, but it's kind of a funny way to put it. There were these,
you can call them non-experiences.
yeah, well, and it was total, and I wouldn't say that there was no individuated awareness at all.
Yeah.
Okay? And so, in its most extreme state, the day that I woke up in the grocery store, in the checkout line, and I saw hands and realized that, oh, I have a body, and here's a grocery list in one hand and a pen in the other, and everything checked off in a grocery cart full of groceries. And I can't remember how I got there, and I started wondering, how did I get here? Do I have a car or do I take a bus? And the mind was trying to figure out how it moved around in this space, because it didn't know. And it really had to reach into, it had to go back and find a memory. It had to go find something to recall as to how it functioned in the space. And it occurred to me that something wrote the grocery list, and something got in the car and drove to the United on 50th and United. And God knows how many people I talked to, because I really can't go to that store without running into somebody. So who knows who I talked to?
Right.
And after that experience, that one, especially because that had been progressively for days getting more like that. You know, every time I went to the store prior to that, for like 2 times prior, I was not remembering things.
Yes.
But when I realized that there was nothing here, I mean, there was no individuation at all, much less there was no memory, no nothing, then when the I came back, right?
Yeah, that's three-dimensional.
Yeah, when the I came back and realized what was happening, it went into a great state of fear and freaked out. Edward tried to tell me not to worry about it, that my brain was just, my physical brain was being rewired. I think that's what you meant, Edward, right? Yeah. And, but at the same time, that didn't really work too well. And then, prior to that, I didn't experience a whole lot of fear. I mean, there was a brief period of time before that that I wasn't experiencing fear, that I was letting things come and go as they would without any attachment. And I think that's why I got to that place. But after that, it seemed like a big downward spiral. And I started experiencing attachment very strongly again, fear of abandonment again, horrified of making a mistake, having extreme fear of making a mistake. And in the last year and a half, 2 years, maybe actually 2.5 years, I would say, for the last 2.5 years, it seems like I've been working on climbing back out of that hole spiritually again. And it appears that if you have something to do, if you're going to be in a body, if you have a karmic agreement or something to still have a body, if you hit that state, you don't have to worry about what you're going to do or what you're not going to do, right? Is that right?
You're right.
It's just going to happen autonomously. It's just going to happen through to some prior karmic agreement.
Right.
So anyway, what advice would you have? I mean, it just seems like I know I'm not starting from the beginning, right? But sometimes it feels like that.
Yeah.
So maybe it was just I had to come back and clean some things up. Maybe everything wasn't really complete, and that's why I had to come back. That's the only thing I can think of. What do you think?
There could be many possible answers to that. When you get close to the path, many things of this nature are possible. Experiences where the ordinary consciousness is suspended for some time, and you experience this other than this three-dimensional state, because that ordinary consciousness is suspended. And the Japanese Buddhists have terms for it. The Sufis have terms for it. These temporary states of consciousness where you get glimpses into the divine. The Japanese call it satori, and I call it sparking. You know how you take a spark plug, you haven't touched it to the body of the car, but it sparks because the spark jumps, you're not really there, but you're that close that the spark is coming across.
I see.
Yeah. As to your particular case, it could be many things that your soul agreed to do some certain things, and too powerful an awareness of that other dimension of yours, which you're actually very close to, would interrupt your, that whatever you're doing. It could be that too. It could be that also.
Like walking in two worlds that we talk about in shamanic work, like a foot into reality.
Well,
the middle razor edge.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, as it relates to happiness. We began with talking about the Buddha, but I was relating to Sherry this thing about Buddha last night. That in the beginning of his teaching, it was very powerful and very categorical, and there was no middle point. And he just talked about, this is the goal, and there's nothing higher than that. You can give up anything for it and just go after it and find it. So what happened widespread amongst his disciples is many young people started to leave home, even when their parents to take care of. They say, you take care of yourself, we've got to go and for this highest knowledge and highest attainment and become part of the Sangha. The Sangha was the group of Buddha. At some point, many of these elderly people got together and called a meeting with Lord Buddha and complained and said that, look, you're destroying something precious and valuable in our society. The young people that were given to taking care of their parents are leaving their homes for this, and who is to take care of us? Which, being the highest of compassion, the heart of the Buddha, is considered the ultimate heart, the ultimate compassion. And he went into seclusion for, I think it was 2 years' time, to try to figure the answer out. Constant meditation. And when he came out, he gave his final teaching of the middle path, also called the middle razor's edge path, which he taught that you have to attain even a higher level of mastery. You have to attain the mastery of living in this world, but being totally untouched by it. And that became his final teaching. To live in this world, but not of this world. Which he said was the middle path.
Which is like being in two worlds at the same time.
Yes.
So those moments of clarity when you're part of the unity, and then you step back onto the razor's edge, it's what I heard her say. Is that what, am I hearing you right? That those are the times when you make the choice.
He's talking about the razor's edge of actually walking that constantly, having one
Yes.
foot in each end.
Constantly. Your consciousness is not divided. Your consciousness is constantly in that unified state. Which you're still, as long as you're in this world, you have your duties and your obligations to fulfill. And you fulfill them staying in your space of unity, but not getting caught in this world and fulfilling those.
What happens with every... I apologize if this is a very simplistic
No,
question.
that's okay. There's no question too simple or too deep.
Should a person attain that perfect unity and clarity and that higher knowledge, I feel like what then? As a collective, as a species, if we were all to get there, what do we do then? Are we a force to help something else, or are we just maybe like a drop of water thrown into a big glass and we're just part of it, or?
It's a good one. That's not
Yeah.
simple.
That's pretty profound.
That's a great question.
Yeah, the issue with that question is that the answer to that, and this is not an escape from the question, the answer to that cannot be contained in the three-dimensional mind. Because
It's too big for us.
it's no. The further path has to come from dimensions that are high. The answers to that, the way to that, has to come, of course, from a dimension higher than that.
Do you think that we can understand that being in these bodies here,
I believe so.
Yes.
if we try hard
I
enough?
believe so. I believe there are people, very few, that live that.
Maybe the masters?
The masters do. The masters do.
But
What's it? Go ahead.
but you said if we try hard enough, and if I understand it right, the harder you try, the further you get from the goal you seek to attain, and that the only way to actually find it is like by falling back into it or by surrendering, and in the act of surrender it becomes it is.
It is.
It's not that
State.
I'm chasing something and I finally caught it. It's that I finally quit chasing it and I realized I was there all the time.
I think it's just maybe a word choice,
Yeah,
but yeah, I understand what you're saying.
yeah.
Let me elaborate a little bit on that question. For centuries, since there was this talk of enlightenment and the goal of life and God realization, call it whatever, nirvana, okay, nobody ever talked about a state beyond. Nobody ever talked about a state beyond until
Yeah.
the very valid and real divine teachings of theosophy were given to the world at the end of the 19th century. And the masters decided the human mind had come to a point where you could talk about the path beyond.
That,
So that's partly answered your question.
I got it.
Yeah. Let me talk about, it's just for you to examine, because it's from the domain of esotericism, spiritual theory, but let me talk about that a little bit. I've done talk on up to the fourth initiation. The fourth initiation is where perfect love completely casts out fear and the duality completely ends. Beyond that, there are fifth, sixth, and seventh initiations. And a fifth degree initiate, the divine mind really blossoms into great depth, and it's the master with incredible, other dimensional powers and all that. And if you read up, if you would like, I can give you a website to go to read the Alice Bailey teachings. There are teachings dictated to Alice Bailey by the master Joel Kuhl from 1919 to 1949. And all those books are free online on a website called lucistrust.org.
They're free online?
They're free online.
How awesome is that?
Lucis?
LUCIS trust.org.
You mentioned theosophy. Have we, as the human race, been there before? Have we evolved to this state before?
Okay.
Is this a cycle?
To answer that, I'll share with you. Life evolves according to theosophy. 7 root races make 7 sub-races make 1 root race. 7 root races make 1 round. 7 rounds make 1 chain. 7 chain make 1 globe. 7 globes make 1 world period. 7 world periods make 1 planetary cycle. 7 planetary cycle make 1